everybody. My name is Sarah O'Hearn. I'm a VP of Product at MoneyThink, and this is my colleague, Ben.
Hey, I'm Ben May. I'm a product manager at MoneyThink.
We're here to talk to you about our solutions around college affordability, which uses AWS infrastructures and working towards some predictive modeling implementation. To start with, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what MoneyThink's all about, what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and the initial solution we've come up with, and what we're planning to do moving forward. So MoneyThink started in 2008 in Chicago. We came out of the financial crisis and was started by some students in the University of Chicago who were working on financial literacy in their local community, going to high schools. They ended up expanding all across the United States, college campuses, were going in, volunteering, doing direct service with high school students, financial literacy, and college access. And through that work over the next 10 years, we started really focusing on why weren't more students graduating from college? What were the blocks to a student successfully admitting into college and then graduating? And our initial solution that I'm going to talk about today was Decided, which we use as a free tool for students and a free tool for the folks that are advising those students, like their educators or advisors. You can go to the next slide.
And the real driving force behind that transition was every student had something that they wanted to interact with when it came to learning about finances. Like some students had jobs and wanted to learn about opening a bank account, and some students didn't, but were helping their parents manage the family finances. But every student at the end of that senior year was making what we kind of determined to be the most important financial decision of their lives, which is, are they going to go to college? And if so, what college? And so that was kind of this unifying moment that all students had to make a choice there. Even if the choice was to not attend, a choice was being made, and so we kind of narrowed in on that problem specifically.
Yes. The problem that we saw was the financial aid letters. So financial aid letters are not standardized, and they're wildly different depending on which college you've applied to. And in fact, we found in our research that some financial aid letters are actually kind of misleading. And this is an example that we pulled where I'd like to see if anybody in the audience could tell me how much free financial aid this student is being offered. If anybody wants to raise their hand. Go ahead. Free financial aid. Huh?
Yeah, that's one of them. So the response was Cal Grant A here in the Grants and Scholarships section.
Right here. Yeah. All right, I'm going to jump to the final answer. They're actually only getting $28,000 in financial aid, but this letter is telling them they're getting $64,000. So that's an example where we saw students getting very confused. They were being encouraged to take out a very high number of loans, which is a block to finishing that college degree because you can get very overwhelmed with all the debt that you're falling into, in addition to all the other reasons it can be hard to get through 4 years or 5 years of college. So what we decided was, how can we standardize this so that students are able to compare apples to apples and can realistically understand what the college is going to cost them and whether or not they can afford to go to that college. Okay? There's an impact on this. There's a problem nationwide in terms of college access, and what we see is that there's a lot of students who qualify for significant amounts of aid and could go to a college that they might assume is out of their price range, but if they applied for that financial aid, they could actually afford that college. And sometimes it can be surprising for students what schools are affordable versus what schools don't actually have the aid available to help them succeed. And they give up that aid. They decide not to take the risk, and they don't apply, they don't complete FAFSA, and they don't end up going to that college. They don't even know that that college exists for them, that there's a school that they could afford and where they could successfully complete their degree. And or they do commit to a college that they can't afford and they take out an exorbitantly high loan amount, or their parents take out exorbitantly high loans. Okay.
So this is our initial solution here. So this is the same award letter we were looking at before. So this is Holy Names University, the same award we saw before. You saw at the bottom of that award letter that student was being, according to the letter, awarded $64,000 in financial aid, and only was going to have to come up with $6,600 to actually attend their first semester. Well, when you take out things like work study, which is a job you have to get and then work while you're on campus, and you take out the Parent Plus loans and the federal direct student loans, the student actually needs closer to $30,000 every year to make this work for them. So you're talking over $150K in student loan debt over 4 years to make this college work for them after looking at an award letter that's encouraging a 17-year-old to take out $30,000 a year, right? So our goal here is to simplify it and really just inform students with exactly the amount of money that they're going to have to come up with. If you want to debt finance that amount, great. That's a totally valid way to come up with that amount of money, but we want to make sure that you are acutely aware of what that amount of money is. So we're going to show you exactly what you owe. We're going to show you where that money is going, what it's being applied to. Financial aid, for example, gets applied to your tuition first, then your housing, and then if there's anything left over after that, you may get some of that to help you cover your personal expenses. So also making sure that this student is aware they're not actually going to get any money from this university, right? It's all just going to go from the university's financial aid office directly to the bursar's office, and the student never sees a dollar of it. So we provide guidance there. On our platform, we're also providing a lot of demographic information about the college, graduation rates that are specific to demographics, geographic information about the university. We're able to do in-state, out-of-state tuition as well, since that's obviously a big driver for increasing tuition for out-of-state colleges. And a big thing we also want to encourage students to do is to be able to compare across multiple. So each of these 3 universities has a different award letter format. So we saw Holy Names, UC Davis and UC Santa Cruz both have different formats as well. So you're talking about 3 distinct formats that mix up grants and scholarships. Some of them call them out, that give students different terms for the same thing. Loans will have, we've seen in our review, federal direct student loans having over 40 different ways that it's listed on award letters. It's one program, but colleges find all sorts of ways to list it on there. So by standardizing this, students can now kind of look through these options and decide what works the best for them, because ultimately that's our goal, right? And again, not necessarily saying a student can't go to Holy Names, but if they have a way to come up with $30K a year, great. If they don't, then you would only need $10K to pull off Santa Cruz over there. So just making sure they're aware of their options.
And the thing about that data is it's helping the student and their counselor if they have a counselor, but maybe they just need to talk to their parents and say, look, this is what the reality of my situation is. There's a lot of reluctance. It's a difficult conversation sometimes, and this is intended to be a visual way for students to look at it holistically.
So our initial implementation is quite simple. We're using AWS Textract to, specifically the tables function, to pull information off of the award letters. The complicated part for us is then parsing all of that data off, again, because the data is coming back in all sorts of different formats, making sure that we're making sense of the correct columns, the correct rows. Some schools will put spring and fall aid into columns, some put it into rows. So there's a lot of navigating and kind of manually parsing out the individual responses that we get from Textract. But this was the initial implementation that we went with for our first setup. And this also helps us generate, you can imagine the amount of data we're able to generate from this. So now I've got university names, I've got the costs that they listed on their award letter, I've got the financial aid packages. I can associate that also to a student who has academic factors, and I know about their geographic and demographic data as well. So we're starting to build out this big data set at the same time. And initially, we've been pretty successful. So we've had multiple organizations. We make this available directly to consumers through an API as well. And so 10,000 Degrees is an organization in California that we work with. They upload about 3,000 award images every year. They were running a process where they were hiring temporary staff, training them on how to transcribe the award letters, and then going through and doing all of that by hand, which is just a huge waste of time when it's a process that can easily be automated. When we kicked off this, we really looked into all sorts of other industries. You look at like the tax filing industry, for example. They're taking in all sorts of documentation, instantly transcribing it. There's no reason this industry couldn't do the same. So we were successful in our direct-to-student services, and then also for our partners, saving them hundreds of hours. And then the next was looking into what now? Okay, so we've got this large sample set of letters that we're translating. We're up against a couple of additional problems. One, as we expanded out of California, things just get more complicated, right? So you've got state aid, you've got federal aid, and you've got institutional aid all coming in. You've got names that start to get somewhat similar, making classification even more complicated. So we classify line items coming off of award letters. The Cal grant you saw on there earlier, for example, is going to be a category grant, subcategory Cal. So I'm specifically organizing all of that data for partners who are maybe reporting on how much money their students are getting or what programs their students are getting their money through. So we have a couple of problems that we're up against. One, as we expand, things get more complex. And then two, we had a huge subset of students with no affordable options. So every option was somewhat affordable or not affordable. A lot of students with only non-affordable options. And so we kind of started to interview those students. We started to look at what are the problems that those students are facing. And what we landed on is the data that a student has available to them in the application phase of the process is just as terrible as what you get in the award letter phase, right? They're going to college websites and looking at the sticker price of a college. Maybe they go to some NCES data where they can see, net price per family income brackets, but even that isn't particularly telling to the individual. So you have students that apply to a lot of out-of-state colleges. You have students that apply to a lot of private colleges. We saw examples, and the marketing to these students is absolutely wild. We saw UNLV, for example, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, since we're here, markets and throughout California, specifically the Bay Area, like crazy, which is great. It's a great university, except for the fact that when you have to pay out-of-state tuition, you're talking about $40K a year to go to UNLV. The ROI on that is not quite the same. And so our solution here was to look into predicting affordability. So complicating our stack a little bit and looking into, on the front end, after we run things through Textract, we're going to then start using Amazon Comprehend custom entity recognition to start classifying, adding a bit more complexity to our aid classification process. So I brought up Cal Grant earlier. Our simple classification process we kicked off with isn't really cutting it anymore. Cal Grant, for example, there's another grant from Cal Poly called the Cal Poly Scholars Grant. Well, you can imagine how regex plays those basically the same and classifies that as a Cal Grant. So we've used some hierarchy to fix that a little bit, but it just wasn't good enough. So we're adding complexity with Amazon Comprehend. We have a human review loop on that using A2I to just better inform that classification. And then we're feeding all of this now into a SageMaker model to start taking basically a student academic strength score and a student demographic strength score, which would be things like their zip code, which we would use to determine like potential household income, things like that. Feeding that into SageMaker along with all of the data that came off of the award letter to start trying to predict for students, if you were to apply to a university, what's the likelihood that it would be affordable for you? So our goal here is to bring all of the data that we've now collected. We've got all this foundational data we've collected through our current tool and bring that earlier in the process to inform students who want to basically build a better application set. When you fill out the FAFSA, you get 10 colleges you get to put on there. It's kind of complicated to change those out. How do we make sure that your affordable option is in that set of 10 is our goal.
So this is a project we're just kicking off. We are really excited to be here at this conference because we know there's a lot of experts out there who've been working on these kinds of machine learning problems already, and we're definitely curious to hear thoughts, questions, and ideas. We have a few minutes left.